Welcome to Cool Explorations. I'm your host, Tony Peters. Today we're going to be speaking to country musician Alexis Taylor. She's going to be talking about her passion for music, how that came about, her success in music, and how God has been at work throughout her life and has brought her to the point where she's at now. Hello and welcome to Cool Explorations. I'm your host, Tony Peters, and today we are on with country music singer, and she's a Canadian, which is awesome, Alexis Taylor, and you can find her at alexistaylormusic.com. Why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit who you are and what God has you doing right now?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the small town of Huntsville, Ontario, to a very musical family. My mom primarily wrote and still writes Christian music, Christian gospel, and my dad primarily does country music. So just growing up, lots of music always around, and I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it, and I grew up mainly singing at church and at school, and just I always kind of knew that music was what I wanted to do with my life. There was never really any doubt or question in my mind that that was what I was meant to do. It was just a matter of, I guess, getting there and trying to figure out, okay, how do I make it work? How do I make a living with music and all that? So yeah, I've just kind of been, for the past 7 years, I've been doing it more professionally and at a different level than obviously when I was just singing at church in high school. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that you have your family support there with that, because a lot of people don't have that with their music. So it's kind of cool that you do have that.
Yeah, it gives you a support system to lean on, and my parents always give me advice too. So if ever I have a song that I'm like, I'm kind of unsure about, if this sounds okay or whatever, they'll tell me the truth and try to help me fix it or make it better, or just say, oh no, we shouldn't write that song. So
Yeah.
it's great to have them always there.
Yeah, as someone who writes a lot of music myself, there are definitely some that mean something to you, but for other people, they don't have that same meaning.
Yep, definitely.
So, what does your testimony look like for you? Your time leading up to your commitment to Christ and your time after that.
Well, I grew up in a Christian household, very much involved in church, I guess, but that was more or less because my mom was and still is the worship leader for their church. And so as a kid, it's like, you have to go because your parents are making you go. Um, and and I called myself a Christian, but looking back on it, I don't think I was really an active uh Christian, I guess. I don't know how else other to describe it, but
Yeah.
you go to high school, you want to fit in, you want to be cool, and the idea of God wasn't something that was prominent, I guess, for me. And it didn't mean that I stopped believing. It just wasn't something that I wasn't practicing my faith every day and growing my faith. And then I got accepted to a university in Virginia called Liberty University. And that's a Christian university that's pretty big. Um, and it wasn't until maybe a year and a half in, um, I almost got kicked out of school. And I found out that one of my roommates had tattletaled on me to the RA, and you weren't allowed to stay over at another boy's house if you were a girl, or vice versa. There was like none of that on campus.
We had the
Again,
same rule. Yeah.
yeah. So my roommate ratted me out when I stayed over at a boy's house that I was dating, um, and so I almost got kicked out. And it wasn't until I had come to the end of my rope and the end of myself, and just kind of like laid the whole situation before God, where it was like, God, I don't have any friends left. I might be getting kicked out of school. Like, this isn't going to look good on my report. card or whatever you call it in college. I don't know. Like no other university is going to want to touch me. Like, what am I going to do? I've messed up big time. And I just remember there was a church on campus and they always kept the door unlocked. And I remember just going there and playing piano and just bawling my eyes out, just putting everything before God. And on my way home back to my dorm, I just sat in my car and just kept crying. And I just felt so alone. And it wasn't until I turned on the radio and the first line of the song that came on was "Never Once Have We Ever Walked Alone." And it was weird. Like it washed over me and hit me in a way that I knew that it was God talking to me and saying like, yo, wake up. Like you're not alone. You've never been alone. And that was really my first encounter with God. And even though I had been like growing up in a Christian home, like going to church, all that stuff, it wasn't until that encounter that I was really like, okay, like God at the end of the day is all that I have. So it was kind of like it was a bad situation, but if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have, I guess, dove more into my faith, and I don't think I'd be where I am today. So it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, and God often uses those hurdles to be blessings, and looking back, you can see those, whereas it's difficult in those moments to see it. So you come from a very musical family. What was there a crux moment that really just was like, I'm going to follow music, or was it like you said before, like you just knew it? And what was that path like to getting your music out there?
Well, when I originally went to school in Virginia, I actually went to school for elementary education. So when I was in my college career, the beginning of my college career, I wasn't doing anything with music. So yes, I wanted to be a musician and I wanted to be a songwriter, but my parents, they had so much experience in the industry and they were like, this is tough. You should have a backup plan. And so I kind of, I don't know, I tried their idea of a backup plan by, going to school and doing the whole elementary education thing, but I couldn't do it. And so it wasn't until I ended up visiting Nashville and transferring from Liberty to going to school in Nashville that it was like, okay, now this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. This is something I can really move forward with, because it all just kind of was falling into place. But again, like going back to how I was saying about just God never letting me be alone, it was, looking back, I can see his hand in all of it, because if that moment wouldn't have happened, I don't think I would have gone out on my own to do that. But either way, it was still a hard thing to move to a new state again and not know anyone. But yeah, I always I knew that I wanted to do music. I just didn't know how.
Mm-hmm. So you had also you've been nominated for some awards and you've won some awards. Do you want to tell us a little about these awards?
Yeah. So well, I've won the Josie Music Awards, the nomination for them, but then the Tennessee Music Awards, I was nominated and won, and that was a few years back, and that was a really cool experience because I actually had like 4 or 5 of my friends come. We all drove down to, I think it was in Knoxville or Memphis or somewhere, and it was just cool to have all of them there supporting me, and quite a few other people in the industry too that I knew that were there. And when they called my name, how you're trying not to like be excited because you like don't want to get your hopes up. Well, that was me in the chair. I was like, yep, just not going to get my hopes up. Like, it's not a big deal. If I lose, it's fine, whatever. And all of a sudden they called my name and I'm like, wait a minute. that's me. And my friend's like tapping me on the shoulder and she's like, hey, they called your name. And I'm like, what? Really? That's crazy. So it was very unexpected, but it was a really cool moment.
Yeah, and congrats on that, because it's a big achievement to win anything in that industry. Because, like you said before, it is a tough industry to be in. You also went on a Scandinavian tour. What did that tour look like for you, and what was that experience like?
Gosh, that it feels like it was just yesterday, but it was back, I think, 2016 or so. And I met a guy named Doug Seegers at one of my shows here in Nashville, and he just was very generous and kind and invited me to come on tour with him. And of course, I'd never done anything like that. So it was a new concept for me. And I just, I ate it up. I loved every second of it. It was everything that I could have possibly hoped that it would be. And Doug and his band were just so welcoming. And I learned a lot about just the tour life and just life in general, like being on the road. You've got all these different personalities and you're always with your band members and
Mm,
like trying to get along with everyone and making sure like, okay, like, you got to be, even when you've got no caffeine in your system, it's like, okay, it's 4 a.m. Like we got to drive for 5 hours to Norway, like stuff like that, where it's like, you learn a lot, not only about other people, but about yourself too. So it was a very, very rewarding trip.
yeah, I bet. And an experience you'll probably never forget. Uh,
Yeah, definitely.
so yeah, that's really cool. Throughout your journey, how have you seen God kind of working and guiding you to where you need to go, and working through your music?
Well, I mean, when you're in the moment, it doesn't necessarily always feel like God's working, but I think things that I wanted for myself and my career and um, just things that have or haven't happened in my music career. I feel as though it was God's way of, even if I wasn't happy in the moment, that maybe I didn't, get a certain award or I didn't get a certain song placement, or if I did get a certain, interview or song on the radio at a certain station, like all of those things only shaped me. And I think it just made me who I am today. So I'm not upset about it because I know that it's God moving and working. And if you had have told me, oh well, you won't be getting this radio gig or this nomination or this, whatever, fill in the blank. I think then that, like, having those no's in your life makes room for other things to happen. And if I hadn't have gone to Liberty, I don't think even that I would be as strong with my faith here in Nashville, um, as I might have been if I just hightailed it out of Huntsville, Ontario, and just ended up in Nashville. Because
Yeah.
like experiences like that made me just who I am today. And I think that that's really been the biggest thing for me, is not understanding necessarily the reasoning for it, but still seeing God stick with me through all of it. Um, and it's, I think, made me into a better songwriter and a better friend and a better person, because just when God moves in your life, all you can really do is be thankful and grateful and accept it. So that's been, I think, something that isn't always easy for me to do, is accept God when he is so good to me all the time. But it's also hard, obviously, being rejected or having something stupid happen, like COVID took 2 years of everyone's life.
Yeah.
So it's like stuff like that, but it's like, you're better for it at the end of the day. So God, God is very, very much moving in my life.
Yeah, and that reminds me kind of the Brad Paisley song where he says, uh, God always answers, just sometimes the answer is no.
Mhm.
And I always have to try and remind myself of that. Just, we're not always going to get yeses.
Yeah.
Sometimes the answer to prayer is a no, and you have to learn how to take it, like you're saying, and be able to move past that, realize that through that you've grown stronger. So I'm glad to hear that that you realize that, because it's an important lesson, a
Yeah.
tough one, very tough one. It's never ever easy to tell yourself that, but yeah, it's definitely a good life lesson. Uh, and one of my favorite songs that you've done is the song "Until I See You Again," and I know that's not a release song, but I absolutely that song just it did touch my heart. Like I absolutely loved that song. Where did the inspiration for that song come from?
So a friend of mine, back probably in 2014 or 15, um, she had gotten pregnant and she had lost her daughter um, during birth. And she had she had come to me and she had said, "Hey, the anniversary of my daughter's death is coming up, and I feel like I have nothing to remember her by that is something positive. When I think of my daughter, all I think of is sadness and loss and heartache." Um, and so she had asked me, "Could you maybe write a song like in her memory?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like that's a really big question to ask me."
Yeah,
Like, I don't know if I can do it, but okay, sure, yeah, all right, I'll try. And I ended up going, well, me and her and a few other friends, we wanted to kind of like take her mind off of the anniversary of her daughter's passing away. And we ended up renting some hotel or something in Gatlinburg. And I just remember waking up in the middle of the night, like 3 or 4 a.m., and I couldn't sleep. And for whatever reason, the idea just came to me. And I grabbed my phone and I start like writing down all of the words and just completely just pouring out all the words. And the next morning, I ended up going home and reread what I had written on my phone, and I started putting it to piano. And it was just, I feel like it was a total God thing. And I feel like it was something that just, because that doesn't happen to me.
yeah,
I can take like months or weeks or years, actually, even to write a song. And the fact that that just came to me like that, it was just, I feel like it was definitely a God thing. And I'll never forget the night that I first played that song. She was in the audience, and it took everything in me not to start crying when I was singing it. She was in the front row, and I was at a writer's round in Nashville. And I played the song, and I could just see like tears streaming down her face. And she had requested me to play the song, so it's not as though I was like trying to make her cry or anything. But she came to me after the show, and she just said, I'm so grateful that you were able to take everything I was thinking and feeling and put it to words and put it to music. And I will never take my life for granted. And and I just want to let you know that I have been in a very dark place for a very long time, and I didn't think that I was going to make it through. And to be honest, I didn't want to make it through, but after hearing your song, I at least have something beautiful to remember her by. And I was just like, "Oh my goodness, like this." I didn't even know what to say. I just hugged her, and it was just kind of like one of those things where it's like, I didn't really write this. Like it
yeah,
was definitely a God thing. And I had no idea that she was struggling that much either. So it was just kind of like, holy, like I wish I wish you had have came to me and told me that beforehand, but also I'm grateful that I was able to help, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, well, and I know people who have had stillbirths as well as miscarriages. So I definitely it is hard to take, and it's hard to know what to say, and at those times. So I think music sometimes is just that great way of reaching out. It is definitely a beautiful song. The other song that you've just finished releasing here was Rock Bottom is your latest one. And what's that song about, and what was the inspiration for that one?
I feel like we're talking about all the sad songs, I guess. But yeah, so Rock Bottom, I actually wrote that during COVID, and I had gotten broken up with, and it was COVID, and I was unemployed, and I was stuck in Canada, and I love my parents, but I was stuck with my parents in their house, and I was just losing my mind. And it all just kind of came all at once, and that's kind of what inspired the song Rock Bottom. Just feeling like, oh my gosh, like when is this going to end? Like, I feel like, I thought I had hit rock bottom before. This is rock bottom, where it's like you're dealing with all these different things, not only like the mental health of COVID, but like being sick during COVID. Like, I've had COVID twice. It's like all these different factors, and then, you know, not knowing what to do with yourself during those times. So I had kind of written rock bottom as a way to share with people that it's okay to hit rock bottom. But the point of the song is that obviously I'm still here. So you can survive rock bottom and you can get through rock bottom. And the song doesn't necessarily speak that directly, but I want it to be the reason that someone, kind of like my friend whose daughter passed away, the reason that someone is like, well, she went through it. If she went through it and she's all right, I can get through it too. And again, the song doesn't necessarily say that directly, but it's just kind of like an outpouring of what I was feeling during my rock bottom, and kind of dealing with the darkness of that, and how much it's not fun, and it sucks, but you'll be better. And it just takes time.
Yeah, and I think that that's something a lot of people are feeling during the peak of COVID. And even now, there's probably a lot of people still feeling that as they're struggling to get jobs. So I think that it's great to have those songs that speak to people in that way. So then, on a more positive note, what is your favorite song that you've written?
Probably Long Way From Home. I
And
released that one right before I released Rock Bottom.
and what's that song all about? What's the meaning in that one?
That one is a song about my journey from Canada to Nashville. And it is a song that is kind of, I don't know how to really, well, first off, anyone listening should go listen to it, and then you can hear it for yourself.
Yes, they should.
but yeah, it's about, the dreams that you have, and you pack your bags and you leave, and it seems like sometimes things don't work out, but you just got to keep pushing through, because it's all you can do sometimes.
Yeah. And So then for you as a musician, what comes next for you? What are you releasing next? What direction do you think you're going?
Well, I do have a new release that I'm super excited about. It's going to be my next release is going to be Let Me Leave. And really, really excited to release that. I've been working with a new producer, a friend of mine. And so I'm really looking forward to letting everyone hear it. And I'm releasing it to radio, so that should be fun. So yeah, looking forward to that. I just don't have a date yet on when that's going to happen. Hopefully before the end of the month.
Well, all the best in that. And we did mention your website before. Just want to remind us what your website is where people can find you and your music.
Yeah, just www.alexistaylormusic.com. And then on like my Instagram and I think Facebook, it's Alexis Taylor Music. And then on, I think Twitter, it's Miss Taylor Music because someone took my name. But anyway, yeah, I'm on all the social medias, all of them.
Yeah, my social media all have, some of them have author Tony Peters and others just have Cool Explorations. So
Yeah,
yeah, it really just depends on what's taken and what's not, like you say.
yeah.
So I always like to leave off with one piece of advice. What piece of advice did you have out there for young musicians who maybe have aspirations with following it professionally?
I would say that you, I would say you need to stop making excuses for yourself and stop waiting, because the longer you wait and the more you keep making excuses and pushing things off and saying, oh, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow, it's just tomorrow ends up becoming 2 years. So that's something that I've had to learn and something I am still working on. And I mean, it's hard because, you know, life gets busy, but that's probably the advice I would give not only new musicians, but any musicians for sure.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because yeah, too often we do procrastinate things, we push them off in anything in life, and
Yeah.
yeah, like you say, then it becomes a thing of, is it going to happen or is it never going to happen? If you don't put in an effort, it isn't going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So thanks for coming on. It's been a real pleasure. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Cool Explorations. You've just been listening to country musician Alexis Taylor talk about her successes in music, how she came about to have a passion for music, and how God has really been at work through her music and through her life to bring her to where she's at now, at a great point in her life. If you would like to reach me for any reason, you can do so at tpeters745@gmail.com.